Join me, Mark Windows, with Tony Hurst for Windows on the World live every Sunday 9 to 11 PM GMT at autonomousmedia.net. Welcome to Windows on the World. We're at the Harlequin Fair, which is in Norfolk, and Piers Corbyn has been given a talk here on his usual subject, weather and the climate. I'm Mark Windows, as you know, and interestingly, both myself and Piers were banned from speaking at the Green Gathering. Now, we're going to talk a bit about that today because we had a very long email from them and we've responded to it point by point, both of us individually and together in an email. And we've had no response from the Green Gathering. They've gone very quiet. They stated that Piers' view was a minority view and also that my own talk, which was called A Post-Truth World, wasn't welcome there. Ironically, my talk is about the shutting down of free speech, and free speech has been shut down at the Green Gathering. So, Piers, you've done a talk here on your usual subject, which was very well received. Now, tell us a bit about what you think of this decision by the Green Gathering.
Well, the decision by the Green Gathering came as quite a shock. I mean, the Green Gathering is held in Chepstow every year, gets lots of people, and you'd think it'd be a bit like the Harlequin Fair here up in Norfolk. And here it's very welcoming. Some people disagreed with what I said, but, you know, most of them actually agreed with what I said, but had a sensible, intelligent
Well, you could have a debate over it, couldn't you? That's the whole point. The reason that you open it up for questions at the end is for people to challenge what you're saying. Now, we weren't given that choice. We weren't given that choice, were we? We weren't allowed to put our point of view over. Now, this infringes our human rights under Articles 9 and 10 of the Human Rights Act. So, what have you got to say about that?
Well, I think that is true. And I said in my note to them, along with your note, or letter, let's call it, that what they're doing on the Green Gathering runs completely against the principles on which these fairs were set up in the 70s and 80s. Because I remember friends of mine going to Stonehenge, getting arrested en masse just to have the right to have some celebration around Midsummer's Day. And I joined into these things. I didn't get arrested on the fields, I got arrested in squatting. And the squatting movement of those days was 110% behind these protests at Stonehenge, you know. So I was providing a base of people who made these fairs possible, right? And yet now they're turning around as if they are the new policemen.
Yeah, so you're
it is completely unacceptable from any of the principles involved in these green movements. And in my opinion, they're splittist. They're trying to split off the people who actually want rational discussion about green issues. And I made the point in the tent here, in the Harlequin Fair, that what we're seeing is a conflict of true green, which is what me and others and yourself represent, Mark, versus fake green, which means believing in man-made climate change, which is putting up electricity prices, or it means building huge dams in the Amazon to produce electricity, but destroying all those tribes and the nature in the Amazon. I mean, that is a big choice. Yet they are defending the, to me, wrongdoers.
Well, you've been an activist for a very long time, you see, as you just said, and it must come as a shock to you because even at Speaker's Corner was set up basically originally where you said your last words before you were hung. But you still had the right to say them. Now, what these green police or these people, basically what it is, they're into an agenda called Festival 2025. And what they're trying to do is put sustainability and transition at their core values. Now, what they're actually saying here is the shutdown of anything which goes against the man-made climate change myth and the CO2 taxation scam. And we can say with some authority that that's what they are because we've both looked into them. Piers has been doing this for many, many years. And he has the qualifications. The interesting thing that they said that Windows on the World lacked academic vigour, not even rigour. I thought we were quite vigorous, you see. So in the email they're saying I'm not vigorous, which I deny that completely. And what we've done is we've got a point-by-point rebuttal which we're going to put into this show so you can have a bit of a laugh about that and what they said, but they haven't come back to us with any response whatsoever, so they've gone very quiet. Now, if this is the future of festivals, then it means that free speech is going to be a thing of the past, even at events like this, which is a great event we're at today. We're up in Norfolk at a thing called the Harlequin Fair, and it has quite a few different stages. There's circus things here, there's a lot of kids, as Piers found out this morning.
Right, yeah.
I got woken up by the kids, but the thing is that this is a little independent festival, so it's outside the grasp of this Festival 2025 vision, which is going to all the bigger festivals. So you're going to find this at Glastonbury and all the rest of the places, and it's going to start coming in more and more like a police state control system, which we have in this free speech shut down. It's quite scary. We've had it through the anti-terror laws, and now the Climate Change Act and all the rest of it is coming into play, and we're going to be speaking on very, very limited topics. Now here we've got many topics. We've got things like surveillance and smart cities. We've got talks on lots of different things. Now the talks that we were going to be attending, there was some kind of mystical stuff. There was all sorts of very good kind of broad spectrum of things. Now what they're doing is they're narrowing down all options, and we've all got to be sustainable and transition. You see, it's always about transition and sustainability, these words that we see everywhere. Now, what do you think, though, Piers, about this as the future? Because these smaller festivals, if this happens to these, it's going to be no fun at all, is it?
No, it'll be no fun at all. I mean, as you can see on the sign, the full title of my talk here was "It's the sun, not CO2. What does it? True green versus fake green, and the future of the world." And you know, we had a real good discussion. But you see, the green gathering people don't want that discussion. They definitely don't want that discussion. They have a one world order view, which they pretend they don't have, but they do have, because when people come forward to talk about it, they try and shut them down. I mean, I also pointed out that actually I have serious green credentials, in the sense that when I was a councillor in the 86 to 90 in Southwark, I was the councillor responsible for setting up an enterprise board involving the private sector to start the combined heat and power station on the Southwark, Lewisham, Greenwich boundary, and that burns all the rubbish in Southwark now and makes it into electricity. Now, you know, that is a green credential, but I did that to stop waste. I mean, I wasn't thinking of CO2, because CO2 actually is the gas of life. You know, but for them, they would probably support that because of CO2, but of course, it still produces CO2 anyway, because it comes out the chimney, but it stops waste. I mean, that's good. But I think the point to make is there is something going on here, and Mark has hit the nail on the head, right? The phrases they use, sustainability and the like, are suppression. We have to fight for accountability in science and politics. We have to fight for the right to discuss anything. And we have to oppose the carbon tax and tax rises, and as you may or may not know, 25% of what you pay in electricity and gas now goes straight to subsidising wind farms and other bird-killing machines is what they are, and various other scams in the energy industry. Now, there should be alternative energy sources tried, absolutely, all the time, but to impose them on people at higher cost, I think is wrong. And I think those Guardian readers, for the sake of a description, who believe in the righteousness of wind farms, they should pay electricity prices as if all their electricity comes from wind farms unsubsidised, right? And then they would see their electricity bills double or treble, and let us see, you know, what they think. Because why should we, who don't have, you know, roofs which we can get solar panels on or so on, pay to subsidise these other people to get cheap electricity? If they believe in it, pay for themselves, have a price structure. So if you want to pay for, you know, coal-powered electricity, then you pay for that, and that will be a lower cost. And there has to be a rule to make sure that the smoke is removed, absolutely, and in England that is the case. So, you know, that was my answer. I would like the right to not have to buy nuclear, wind farm, or solar power.
So yes, this green energy agenda, it really needs explaining properly, doesn't it?
It does, absolutely. what they were doing is imposing things which are expensive, but they're not actually even good the way they're done. You see, when you have a wind farm, if the wind doesn't blow in the midwinter when it's very cold, high pressure, you've got to bring in other sources, which you can ramp up a coal-fired power station, but there's a limited number of them. And what they're doing primarily now is bringing in massive diesel activity all over the country. And this is causing diesel pollution. And this is not good at all. It's actually bad. And other times in the summer, when the wind is like more controllable or whatever, or even the solar power, and then they ramp down the coal-fired power stations, again, that is an inefficient use of resources because the coal-fired power station's wasting. So you see, half the time the wind farms can blow and half the times they can't. And this type of energy production is inefficient. But I would say about solar power in general, that the future of energy in the country within 50 years may be that really cheap solar power will be developed. Now, there is issues involved in getting the metals out of the ground that are used for the solar power and the large pollution involved in that. That is true. There's a lot of issues about battery production, but solar power could be an answer. But right now, it's not. It's ruining fields and reducing agricultural production where they have turned the field over to solar power, and it is expensive and it shouldn't be imposed on it. It should be kept as an experimental thing. And on the electricity matter, those people who think that electric cars are the future should look at the actual facts. To produce a battery for an electric car produces the same amount of CO2 as then running an ordinary car on average for 8 years. And this CO2 is produced up front before you've done any driving. So the actual CO2 production of electrified cars is bigger than sticking to petrol. Now, it's sold to you under the guise of saving the planet. It's not saving any planet. It's making a lot of money for the big corporations behind this so-called green story.
Yes, and also it's restricting your rights to travel because electric cars can only go about 95 miles before a recharge.
And they're damned expensive. I can't afford. I've got an old Vauxhall Cavalier, right? Well,
this is the point, though, Piers, that all of these old vehicles, they have to pass the emissions test, the same one as the new vehicles. So basically, what they're doing is they're taking away our rights of travel. That's what this is really about. So all those people at the Green Gathering, as I said earlier, Turkey's voting for Christmas, and thanks for the publicity, and we won't see you next year. Join me, Mark Windows, with Tony Hurst for Windows on the World Live every Sunday 9 to 11 PM GMT at autonomousmedia.net. So here's the email we got from the organisers of the Green Gathering. We are writing with regard to the invitation for Piers Corbyn and Mark Windows to speak at the Green Gathering this year. While it has always been and remains the policy of the Green Gathering to platform diverse speakers, activities and entertainment, our charitable status does require limits to what we might perform. One of the key objectives of the charity is education for sustainability and transition. While that may encompass many viewpoints, speakers on human impact on climate change denial and conspiracy theories regarding some well-established international environmental policy initiatives undermine the educational objectives of the charity and event. While Piers' position is well documented, it is regarded as a particularly minority view in comparison with the consensus of the IPCC and the scientific community. Mark's views clearly lack academic rigour and neither appropriate education. There are other activities, etc. at Green Gathering that lack academic vigour, but these are counterintuitive to the whole Green Gathering mission. Therefore, we are taking the unusual action of requesting that you withdraw the invitation to those speakers from the Green Gathering. We understand that this may cause you some embarrassment, which is not intended. We don't intend either to micromanage any area content for orthodoxy or heresy. But on this occasion, directors and trustees concerned that the subject and their promotion are just too counterintuitive to the Green Gathering core mission. to take an interest in Jeremy's less famous brother and also risks damaging publicity in mainstream media, which may take an interest in Jeremy's less famous brother with a view to embarrassing both the Labour Party and the Green Gathering. This is not a decision we have come to lightly, and we thank you for your cooperation and will continue to assist in any other way. With respect, Shane, M, Linda and Steve Muggs. Now, here is our response to all the points raised in that email. In response to your email, Talks by Piers Corbyn and Mark Windows, can you please clarify the following points and answer the questions raised by your censorship and the assumptions made in your email? You state, while it has always been and remains the policy of the Green Gathering to platform diverse speakers, activities and entertainment, our charitable status does require limits to what we might perform. Okay, can you clearly define what limits there are to what is spoken about, as the two talks contain information in the public domain and in the public interest? Can you state how the Charity Commission, your charity and your mission statement differ from what is stated in the Human Rights Act? 1. Piers Corbyn's talk on weather and climate has been presented by many institutions, including charities, and contains only factual material which is in the public domain, and there are no moral or legal reasons why it should be banned by yourselves from a third-party venue as an event you are managing. Mark Windows' talk, The Post-Truth World, contains information which is in the public domain and in the public interest. It contains factual analysis and data sourced from government legislation, publicly funded organisations and policy makers. The talk is about human rights and free speech. The Human Rights Act clearly states that within the law there are inalienable rights to free speech. Everything in these talks is within the scope of the Act and breaches no known laws. Can you explain why you failed to comply with the Human Rights Act? And here we quote Articles 9 and 10 of the Human Rights Act. It goes on, it is stated by yourselves on behalf of the Green Gathering, quote, one of the key objectives of the charity is education for sustainability and transition. While that may encompass many viewpoints, speakers on human impact on climate change denial and conspiracy theories regarding some well-established international environmental policy initiatives undermine the educational objectives of the charity and event. Close quotations. Okay, let's respond to that. You state that the key objectives are sustainability and transition. These are politicised propaganda terms and have no legal meaning or factual standing. These terms are used by the United Nations under Agenda 21 and Agenda 2030. Why is this statement described by yourselves as educational? Can you explain what you mean by many viewpoints? Can you explain what you... We quote them and state, established international environmental policy initiatives, close brackets, are not factual. They are policies which are not proven to be in the public interest or in most cases not legally binding. You use the term climate change denial. This is a propagandized term and has no legal meaning. It is a term used by those who hold rigidly to a belief which is not scientifically proven. No one can possibly deny that the climate changes. Neither speaker has stated that the climate does not change. The climate is always changing. This is the only known consensus on the subject. Let's have another quotation from that email. They quote, while Piers' position is well documented, it is regarded as a particularly minority view in comparison with the consensus of the IPCC and the scientific community. Okay, let's respond to that. 1. The IPCC consensus is actually a minority view, which is presented as fact. There is no evidence that the claims of the IPCC are mostly true, and it is believed that none exists. Point 2. The IPCC have provably used fraudulent data and projections which have not manifested and are at best grossly exaggerated. This is in the public domain. The IPCC is a political, agenda-led organisation and not an unbiased scientific body as you appear to claim. Can you clarify what you mean by the scientific community? Can you present which unbiased data you are using to assume that Piers may hold a minority view? And why would a minority view be untrue or unacceptable? Do you discriminate against minorities? If so, which ones? Please list them. Bearing in mind there's been no response to any of our questions here. If these beliefs are the basis of your education, they are merely politically motivated propaganda and not factual instruction, as the claims are not based on known facts. There seems to be some confusion in your statement, interpreting education as indoctrination. Please explain what your interpretation of education is. Then they go on to quote, Mark's views clearly lack academic rigour and neither appropriate education, close brackets. Okay, so our response is, please specify which of my views clearly lack academic rigour. None of the factual information I present is my view. My information is all sourced and fact-checked. I am allowed to hold my own views alongside the facts. These are my inalienable rights and cannot be denied by any person or organisation. Go back to the Human Rights Act for that one. Any views held are within the law and inalienable. What do you mean by appropriate education? This appears to be in the context of what you previously stated as education, which is merely being in agreement with one-sided policy objectives. If this is not the case, please explain fully. Let's carry on and quote the rest of their email. There are other activities, etc., at the Green Gathering that lack academic vigour, but these are counterintuitive to the whole Green Gathering mission. Now, this appears to be an admission that you're censoring the talk. Please explain fully what is meant by this statement. And they carry on. This is another quote from them. Therefore, we are taking the unusual action of requesting that you withdraw the invitation to those speakers. Close brackets, we'll carry on with our questions. Can you clarify whether you are requesting or ordering the speakers to be withdrawn? Of course, they never responded, as you know. And what authority and legal standing are you relying on for this statement? Let's quote them again from their original email. We don't intend either to micromanage any area content for orthodoxy or heresy, but on this occasion, directors and trustees concerned that the subjects and their promotion are just too counterintuitive to the Green Gathering core mission to take an interest in Jeremy's less famous brother, and also risk damaging publicity in mainstream media which may take an interest in Jeremy's less famous brother, with a view to embarrassing both the Labour Party and the Green Gathering. So here's our response. As you have already stated, you clearly intend to micromanage every part of the festival. Please explain how talks on free speech and weather are counterintuitive to your core mission. Your reference to Jeremy's less famous brother appears to be a derogatory statement in the context and use. Can you explain why you're showing bias in the case of Piers Corbyn? Under what authority is your organisation speaking on behalf of other media organisations? Why do you assume that all other media will automatically hold negative views over what Piers has to say? You imply that Piers is an embarrassment to your event and the Labour Party. This is untrue and beyond your authority, and also not in the public interest. There is no evidence that this opinion does not expose underlying bias and discrimination against Piers Corbyn, and it is believed that none exists. Please send a copy of your mission statement and point out how and why talks on free speech and weather are against your policy and not in the public interest. So that was my response, and now here's some more from Piers Corbyn, who also responded. It beggars belief that you purportedly choose to interfere in freedom of speech in the purported interests of one political party and against the brother, Piers Corbyn, of the leader, Jeremy Corbyn, of such, when he, Piers Corbyn, has been involved in campaigning support for the party and his brother Jeremy for over 50 years. Your political interference is completely contrary to charity law. It is also the fact that anyone of legal fluency who knows of your improper behaviour and who fails to report it to the Charity Commission is guilty of aiding and abetting such impropriety and vulnerable to court action themselves. Notwithstanding any of the following paragraphs, we request, prior to the Green Gathering 2017, information on each of your academic and technical qualifications, and require a discussion meeting prior to Green Gathering 2017 of us two and you four, and we suggest you bring a qualified scientist with you who is in command of the facts and developments in climate matters. Where, for your information, it is now apparent there never has been consensus support for the CO2-driven climate idea, but only a number of scientists eager to receive funding support simply for saying they were looking into CO2 effects, if any, on climate. It is also now clear that the UN claims on climate, now openly challenged by President Trump and Putin and ex-President of France Sarkozy, which came from the same stable as the weapons of mass destruction, are equally as reliable as the false weapons of mass destruction claims, which led to the Iraq War, millions being killed, and the current waves of terror and strife in North Africa, the Middle East and Europe. Therefore, we suggest your best course of action is to withdraw the letter unreservedly, apologise to us, reinstate the platform we were granted in good faith at Green Gathering, and apologise to Green Gathering in public for any slights or misunderstandings that may have been unintentionally perpetuated against us. It goes without saying that the open platform / diverse activities and charitable status of Green Gathering does not require you to act as thought police against views or scientific or other findings you may not understand or agree with, but rather it requires you not to act in such a manner. It is beyond belief that your approach even sees the light of day when the origin of green festivals and gatherings around Stonehenge and the associated housing and squatting movement in the 1970s, in which one of us was involved and arrested over 40 times, was the total antithesis of the attitude of the purported signatories. That was the response from both Piers Corbyn and myself, Mark Windows. There will be a full report in our radio show at autonomousmedia.net on the whole matter. Join me, Mark Windows, with Tony Hurst for Windows on the World Live every Sunday 9 to 11 p.m. GMT at autonomousmedia.net.